Hi, aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
All right, let's get this party started. Welcome to Aliʻiōlani Hale. My name is Troy Andrade. I am a proud graduate of Richardson Law School. I am a law professor now and current director of the Ulu Lehua Scholars Program, which is formerly known as the Pre-Admissions Program. 1974 is when the program started, so this is its 50th year. And throughout this year, we've been having a series of programs to honor and celebrate the many folks who have contributed to making it such a success that it is today. And so this is the third program we had, and this is a program that's going to focus on this awesome guy that I've never met, heard a lot of stories about, and looking forward to the stories we're going to hear today. So on behalf of the Lehua program, on behalf of the African American Lawyers Association of Hawaii and the Judiciary History Center, welcome. Thank you to our co-sponsors for putting together this event. I wanted to extend a special thank you to the History Center team, Matt and Keahe Ahukini, and Brianna back there, who really helped pull this all together. So thank you to you folks. I also wanted to thank Chief Justice Rechtenwald and the Judiciary for allowing us to use this special venue. It's not often that you get to use the actual Supreme Court courtroom to hold programs. So thank you to the Judiciary for that. And finally, I wanted to extend my deepest aloha to my colleagues at the law school. Dean Nelson, thank you. Former Dean Avi Soifer and Professor Bill Chang, thank you so much. Many hands have gone into making the Lehua program what it is today, and all of my colleagues have been there from the beginning to make it such a success. I am but one in a long line of very, very lucky folks who've been able to direct and lead what is now called the Lehua program. Our program, which started 5 decades ago, began when the students and faculty from that very first class decided that the law school needed a program to ensure that the student body reflected the community at large. Chief Justice Richardson personally reached out to and successfully convinced renowned civil rights lawyer and law school dean, who was retired at the time here in Hawaii, George Johnson, to run the pre-admission program. And Dr. Johnson did so. He was followed by a series of other directors, all of whom giants in their own right, including Corey Park, Carol Mon Lee, John Van Dyke, John Spade, Al Lindy, Judy Waitman, Chrissy Jima, and Linda Krieger. Building off Dr. Johnson's solid foundation, these directors cultivated a pipeline of amazing advocates and lawyers, and they really expanded the reach of the program. While some of the things have structurally changed about the program, at its core, the program is the same, providing support to students with a commitment and passion for serving the underserved, the marginalized and underrepresented in our community, training our students to be peer support systems for their near colleagues, getting out into the community, giving back, and ensuring all students know that they can too become a lawyer. We've graduated, by my count, 446 students who have become, yeah, it's awesome, who have become judges at almost all levels, including, we're going to have a federal judge this fall, political leaders, including a lieutenant governor, city council chair and vice chair, countless public service lawyers, many firsts in our state, named partners, and everything in between, including some really awesome and fun law professors. But all of this had to begin somewhere. And tonight I'm so excited to open the doors again of our highest court to create space for us to learn about Dr. George Marion Johnson and the lives, contributions, and experiences of amazing African American lawyers here in Hawaii. To help me tonight, we have an esteemed group of panelists. And now, honestly, we could really spend an hour talking about each of them and their careers and the amazing things they're doing. But we don't have that time, unfortunately, tonight. but I'm going to say a little bit about them, and I'll invite them each to say a little bit about themselves if they'd like when they give their remarks. But I wanted to say a short blurb about each of them. So all the way on the end over there is Daphne Barbee-Wooten. She is a civil rights pioneer in her own right. She's a highly respected lawyer and leader, and has been, from my law professor view, one of the keepers of the stories here in Hawaii, one of the keepers that are so important to ensuring that the stories of all of us get told. So, Daphne, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Our next speaker will be Douglas Crosier. Doug Crosier he's a graduate of the first pre-admission cohort and was a student of Dr. Johnson. He also is a highly, highly respected litigator and holds the distinction of being the first Richardson Law School graduate to become the HSBA president. 30 years, right, after the law school was founded.
Just about.
Yeah, took about 30 years, but Doug was the first one from our school to be the bar president. So welcome, Doug. Thank you for being here. Our third panelist is Leslee Matthews. Leslee needs no introduction, but I will do my best. Leslee is a graduate of our Ulu Lehua Scholars Program and has been, even prior to law school, a passionate leader for those most vulnerable in our community. Leslie is also a litigator. I think there's a theme here, all these litigators. And currently is now Vice President of Legal Services at the Domestic Violence Action Center. And Leslie is so young, but she has been teaching at the law school too. So awesome. We are so lucky to have you here. Thank you, Leslee.
Thank you, Troy.
And so that is enough from me. And I'm going to turn it over first to Daphne to kick us off.
Thank you. Aloha to everybody who's taken the time on a Wednesday afternoon to come to the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court and to learn about Dr. George Johnson. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about him, and I did write some more in this book, African American Attorneys in Hawaii. You can see me after because I only have a short time to talk. Dr. Johnson came to Hawaii for retirement, and he was 74 years young when he arrived in Hawaii, and he met with William Richardson, who's Chief Justice of the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court. And together they talked about building the law school here at the University of Hawaii. They got laws passed, and Dr. Johnson has a multiple experience in starting law schools. He started the law school in Nigeria, Nsaka, Nigeria, in the 1960s. It's northern Nigeria, and he actually became the provost of the University of Nigeria, starting that law school in the 1960s. And they named a street after him. He stayed there for a couple of years, made sure the law school was on the right track. And so he has a wealth of knowledge of helping law schools begin and to continue. But he didn't start with building law schools and becoming a lawgiver. He was born in New Mexico. He came to California. He attended the University of California, Berkeley, when he was one of the first African Americans to go to school there in 1929, 1929. He went there, he graduated from law school, and he writes in his autobiography, which you can see at the Hamilton Library School at the UH. You can actually read in his own words what happened to him. When he was in law school, he was the first Black there, and when he asked questions of professors, the other students would stomp their feet so the professor couldn't hear his questions, and when the professor tried to answer him, they would stomp their feet. Racism. That didn't stop him. He kept moving forward. As we know, we're not going to stop with that stuff. So he moved forward, and he became the first African-American tax lawyer for the state of California. Tax. That's a very important position. And he met a lot of people through his work, being the tax attorney there in California. Became politically involved, and he was recruited from Howard University to become a Howard University law professor. And he did so. He went to Howard with historically Black college, university, and helped start the law school there. He started the first Howard Law Review. He started that. And so he helped students and faculty. He also, on the side, worked for the NAACP, helped write briefs. One of them is up there, Board of Education, Topeka, Brown versus Board of Education. Brown versus Board of Education. But not just that, but Sweat versus Painter and a lot of other, he assisted with a lot of other law briefs. And in addition to that, he was becoming very well known, and some people at Howard Law School said that he was really tough, but he would help students because a lot of them didn't have the funds or the money to continue with law school. And they would even go up to him and say, you know, I can't, I'm gonna have to drop off. And he said, well, why? And they said, well, monetary, I have money problems. And he said, meet me after school, you know, and he'd give money from his own pocket to the law students because he wanted them to succeed that much. And in addition to being a professor at the Howard University, he was involved in politics. And one of the things he did, he was one of the first persons on the Fair Employment Practice, which is back in the 1940s, right after World War II. The Fair Employment Practices Committee, he was appointed by President Eisenhower to look at what was going on with the Department of Defense contractors to make sure that the executive order integrating the military contractors, defense contractors, was in fact being integrated, and he did so. From there, he got appointed, and the FEP is called Fair Employment Practices. The FEP is a precursor to what we now know as the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which does handle federal contractors and federal employers, as well as federal agencies and all employers, actually. Now it's private employers. And through his meeting with presidents and cabinet members, he also got appointed to be one of the first people in the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights, 1949. And what he did as one of the commissioners for the U.S. Civil Rights, he and the commission began to review voting problems. In the South, there were a lot of issues, but not just the South, but the North, where African Americans were not allowed to vote. There were obstacles placed in their way. And he recounts one of the worst states was Louisiana. And they were able to get investigators to go down and find out that the state of Louisiana had a requirement that if you wanted to vote, you had to have 2 registered voters to say that you were authorized to vote. Well, at that time, there was segregation, so there were very few, if not any, African Americans allowed to vote. So you had to go, it was impossible, it was an obstacle. And so they wrote up a report, U.S. Commission of Civil Rights, and it became later known, it was used, a lot of the investigations was used for the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act. So he's really big. He was really big, By the time he came to Hawaii, he had a wonderful legacy already, but he didn't want to retire. I mean, he came to retire, but he met Justice Richardson, and next thing that happens, he's the head of the pre-admission program, creating the pre-admission program to make sure that people who are not privileged, people who aren't ordinarily in the pipeline to become lawyers, people who couldn't afford to go to the school in the mainland, were admitted into the law school at the University of Hawaii. And it was a wonderful program. My friend Judy Waitman was once the pre-admission program director. And I remember her telling me these stories, but he was the first. And so just a little aside, he also, when he came here, he was also very involved with some of the people here in Hawaii. And he only he was only the director for 1 year. So when he first came and started it up, he started it up, and then he passed the baton and went to the University of Michigan, wrote a book about education and the law, stayed in Michigan for a year, came back here, I think, to Hawaii to really, truly retire. But one of the things he says and did as he was practicing law and amongst all the people that he met and working very hard for not just civil rights, but for law, to make sure law was more just and more equal and more open to many diverse people and not just a select few. He really had an interest, as Doug Crosier will tell you, in his students. He talked about his experiences as one of the few Blacks in the government in California and going to law school and getting through that. And when he died, which was in 1987, I believe he was in his 90s at that time, he continued his legacy of making sure the pre-admission program was well funded. He had a trust. And with that trust, he left monetary amounts for students who need financial support at the University of Hawaii. And not just for students, but through that trust, the law school was able to hire professors, minority professors from the mainland, to come and talk in certain areas. And we met quite a few of them. The African American Lawyers Association met quite a few of them when they came through the University of Hawaii Law School. So he has a great legacy, and it's wonderful to know that there are people like that who really give of themselves for the law and for justice and equality and want to ensure their legacy is continued. And I'm thanking you and the law school, University of Law School, to shine a light on this brilliant man and respect and honor him. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug?
Okay. Aloha and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome Dean Camille Nelson, Dean of the William S. Richardson School of Law, and I see out there Avi Soifer, the former dean of our law school and now a current professor, and Professor William Chang there. Welcome coming here. And welcome to all of you, HSBA attorneys, guests, and especially welcome to the alumni and the current students I see out there in the Ulu Lehua Scholars Program. Welcome, and thank you for attending. Before I forget, I wanted to add to a point that Daphne brought up. He did leave a generous trust for the school. He appointed me as a co-trustee with, I believe, the First Hawaiian Bank to administer his trust after his passing. And my recollection is he left $500,000 to the school. And he was a very generous person. The last time I saw him, it was at his bedside at Queens Hospital just before his passing. He was a wonderful man. And I want to say much aloha and mahalo to Troy Andrade, the current director of Ulu Lehua Scholars Program. Because of him, we have this program tonight, his foresight and his initiative. Thank you, Troy. And thank you and mahalo for using your pauhana time after work. I know you can be relaxing at home or doing something, but I appreciate your being here to hear the things and the wonderful things that Dr. Johnson did for us, for our law school, for our state, and our legal community. I was asked to share my experience that I had with Dr. Johnson and my thoughts and my fond memories of him. He was my mentor and later a dear friend whom I've admired to this day and I miss. He affected me by generating my interest and understanding of the judiciary, which what it stands for, and how it affects our lives and our society today. You've heard a lot of the Supreme Court recently, and that's how much power and authority they've been blessed with. And regardless of how we feel about their decisions as a court, they have the ultimate say, and they are entitled to respect their authority, their validity, and their good faith in trying to do the right thing and reach the right decisions in all cases. The court changes from conservative to liberal over time, and in order to give its vitality, it needs that respect regardless of how you feel at the moment about their decisions and what they do. Dr. Johnson was a great jurist, a legal scholar, a legal pioneer, and a civil rights advocate. He literally walked the talk, who personally involved himself in civil rights and race relations and lived a life of action in pursuit of justice for everyone, including dedicating his life to legal education, as Daphne has told you about. That is his legacy. I was one of 12 students of the 1974 inaugural class of the University of Hawaii Law School pre-admission program, now called the William S. Richardson School of Law's Ulu Lehua Scholars Program, led by Director Troy and Professor Troy Andrade. Dr. Johnson was recruited and appointed as its first director. He had the responsibility to launch, lead, and teach this inaugural class of 12 students. He was our exclusive professor, with whom we had a weekly class for the entire school year. Back then, the program and its students was not, formally part of the first year class. That changed years later, I think for the better. But back then it was a separate student body, in effect, of 12 students. We were not part of the first class. It was important for us to feel that we had a presence there. And Dr. Johnson had a lot to do with that and made us feel that way as our professor. He selected constitutional law as his curriculum platform, and from week to week, we read, analyzed, answered his questions, and had back and forth discussions with him about landmark case decisions and opinions of the United States Supreme Court. Those classes with Dr. Johnson were memorable because he challenged and engaged us, sometimes all as a group and other times one-on-one. He would say, "We are going to put this case in a rock crusher," meaning that we were going to analyze it in every detail. In our class, we sat with him in a circular configuration. I like this approach of him sitting with us, in contrast with lecturing from a podium. He still had that aura of a learned professor and a leader, but at the same time, I felt we were not separated from him. And we were all together as one, in one group. Dr. Johnson once remarked to our class that a lawyer is the social architect of society. When you think about it, Dr. Johnson's statement and observation were accurate. Lawyers are advocates, some of whom become judges, and who in part, and at times certainly, make social policy decisions. rightly or wrongly, depending on your individual viewpoint. Judges and lawyers substantially populate the legislative branch of government by their sheer number. It seems many of them are in key positions and as such influence the passage of law, which govern all of us. The same influence is often seen in the executive department, but most influential, in my personal opinion, is the responsibility and the authority that the judicial branch has. The courts and the Supreme Courts of the states, the federal courts, and the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court makes decisions that govern us for generations. Dr. Johnson's curriculum of studying appellate decisions for me clearly made that point. His class and his teaching influenced me to this day in recognizing the importance and responsibility of the courts. When the issue or situation is whether the law is constitutionally valid, as authorized by the United States Constitution, the buck stops there. The United States Supreme Court. Dr. Johnson experienced racial discrimination early on in the very beginning of his legal path and journey. He witnessed firsthand the conflict and struggle as an African American. I remember his story he shared with me, and Daphne elaborated on that. He told me about a classroom incident when he was a law student there at the University of California at Berkeley. As Daphne explained, a professor called upon him, as the professor would call upon the students in the class, to answer a question. And he told me when he stood up to answer it, as Daphne described, the class started stomping their feet loudly. An attempt to drown him out, to drown his voice out. Imagine if that happened today. What would occur and what consequences the students and the law school would face. That was the time Dr. Johnson was in law school, and that's what he had to witness and bear. It was civil rights leaders and pioneers like him whose actions and perseverance paved the way to change and eliminate that kind of conduct from our society. He also told me about a meeting which occurred years and years later in his life. It was meeting in the Oval Office with President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had appointed him as a director of the United States Civil Rights Commission. Dr. Johnson was the only African American on that commission. The discussion was just between them. It was about racial discrimination and whether that can change. President Eisenhower expressed a viewpoint, either suggesting or stating explicitly that you cannot change the attitude of a person. Dr. Johnson's response. He responded by informing the president that attitudes will change if you penalize racially discriminatory conduct. Dr. Johnson spoke forthrightly to the President of the United States. That was the courage Dr. Johnson possessed. And then there was a time when he was in the South, as he told me one day, on Civil Rights Commission work. He told me the story about having to be guarded by armed marshals as they escorted him from a southern city or town to the airport after he completed his work. He literally risked his life for racial justice. I mentioned earlier that Dr. Johnson introduced our class to the concept of civil rights. He opened our eyes, our students, the 12 of us, about another right, another civil right. He opened our eyes to have us explore and think about the fundamental civil and constitutional right of free speech. I remember a United States Supreme Court we studied with Dr. Johnson involving free speech in the form of free expression under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Looking back, it seems to me, in my personal opinion, that the study discussion we had with him is just as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. It was a case involving two public high school students exercising their right of free speech by their symbolic expression of wearing black armbands protesting the Vietnam War. The principals of the public school system of that public school district issued a policy prohibiting such conduct and suspended the two high school students. On appeal to the United States Supreme Court, the Supreme Court held that the school district's policy violated the First Amendment. In the context of the free speech doctrine, Dr. Johnson posed a question to us in the classroom and asked us if any one of us would object to a speaker who was a member of the American Nazi Party, who would speak, presumably, at a public event at a public place. He asked what we thought about a member of the American Nazi Party speaking to the public. I remember one of our class members said that speakers should not be allowed to speak because of the strongly anti-American message. I remember the response by and the facial expression of Dr. Johnson hearing that student's comment. He was careful and thoughtful in expressing his disagreement with silencing that speaker, and he explained his position. Dr. Johnson made the point that no matter how controversial a situation or how offensive the speaker may be, or how wrong you may think the speaker's words and ideas are, you should protect the speaker's right to speak in order to ensure the fundamental right of free speech and expression for everyone who may wish to express ideas, even if you strongly disagree with the speaker. That was a lesson I learned that day. And to this day, I value, because of him, I value, honor, and strongly respect the principle of free speech, and it made me realize to this day that I have a responsibility to protect that precious freedom. This is a result of Dr. Johnson's impact and influence on me and others. I value the time I had with Dr. Johnson, and I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to be a student and to have him as a dear friend. I continue to have contact with him in the years, and we would have breakfast and lunch from time to time in downtown. And I'll always remember and cherish my time with him. Dr. Johnson was a true jurist and a remarkable human being. I miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Leslie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this early evening. And I too want to thank you all for being here and both to you, Douglas, and to you, Daphne. I'm really excited to learn personal stories that you both were able to have with him. And it's because of pioneers um, like him that I'm able to even have gone to law school, to be a practicing attorney as a Black woman. A little bit about myself, I grew up on Maui, and law school brought me back home to Hawaii. And I will never forget the phone call that I got from an unknown number. I silenced it because I was like, this is spam or something. And it was the director of the Ulu Lehua Scholars Program telling me that I had gotten into law school. I'd already made it in my mind that I was going to move from Texas to Boston. I had never lived on the East Coast. And I got an opportunity to come back home for law school. And one of the things that really had my decision to go to the William S. Richardson School of Law was to be an Ulu Lehua scholar and to really have a program that focuses on social justice and brings together people with unique and diverse backgrounds. And so that program that he started is the very reason that I decided to come home to Hawaii to learn and then stay in Hawaii to practice law. I was also fortunate to meet my very best friend, Chad Au, at the law school, who's also a Lehua scholar. And there's something special about being an Ulu Lehua scholar. You know, studying together, you develop this almost family bond, being a Lehua scholar. And so I wonder if Dr. Johnson was able to think about all of those things when he thought about this program. And I see some of the current Lehua scholars here tonight. If we were able to think about all of these things that would happen because he had a dream to do things. And so I want to share a little bit about Dr. Johnson. Before I came to law school, I went to DC. My grandmother started the gospel choir at her church, and she was being honored. And so I went to DC, and I just had an opportunity to speak at a conference there. And I went back to Dr. King's memorial. And one of the things that he said in Norway is that I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. And I can say emphatically that the Ulu scholars, the attorneys from the African American Lawyers Association, see to it that those things can happen. We fight so that people can have equal access to housing and food and people's basic necessities. And we walk in the legacy to be sure that we can have equal access to education. My mother is here. She was born in 1951, and it was a time of segregation. People didn't have equal access to education. They didn't have those things. So things that Dr. Johnson pioneered are certainly near and dear to my heart. And I hear about those stories of stomping their feet and the one chair rule. You may have one Black person that could attend law school, but they had one chair outside of the loss of the classroom where people were learning. And so it's important for me that we continue to open doors to more people so that more people can understand this freedom that you can experience for your body and for your spirit. I am honored to serve as the current president of the African American Lawyers Association of Hawaii, and the African American Lawyers Association and the Ulu Lehua Scholars Program helped get me through law school. I had incredible mentors here that talked to me and encouraged me, and when things got hard, encouraged me to continue and keep going. And so to our current students that are here, I want to encourage you to keep going, to know that your place in the law school is valued. You are selected to be an Ulu Lehua scholar because there's something unique about you that the legal field needs from you. And I want to tell you a little bit about the African American Lawyers Association. So we were formed in 1988, and the organization, and this is from your book, so you probably know a little bit about what I'm going to
lot of people were there.
are going to read from Daphne Barbee-Wooten's book, but the organization was created after a circuit court judge when he referred to a black bail bondsman as an N-word in the woodpile. And at the time those comments were made, the African American Lawyers Association called for a African American judge, and we are great lobbyists, we are great advocates, and that continues on till today. And because of the advocacy and because of the brilliance, the sheer brilliance of Judge Sandra Sims, the African American Lawyers Association was able to lobby and advocate for our former president of the African American Lawyers Association, Judge Sandra Sims, to become the first African American female judge here in Hawaii. And so, when I tell you we come from greatness, we literally come from greatness. The sky isn't the limit. To any of you that may be thinking, oh, I have this dream, I have this thing I want to do, the sky is not the limit. Burst through the sky. Reach for things, because we didn't know that it was possible to have a black judge here in Hawaii until Sandra Sims was there. And now we have Judge Sandra Sims. During my term as president, we've been able to honor Judge Sandra Sims, but we've also had 3 other black attorneys appointed as judges here in Hawaii. Judge Maloyan is serving as a family court judge. Judge Bhavon Bowers, who is our vice president of African American Lawyers Association, is the first black female to be appointed in Maui County. And just recently, we have Judge Micah Smith, the first, let's clap so you can hear us wherever he is, to be appointed as a federal judge for the U.S. District of Hawaii. And so I am so proud to be a Ulu Lehua scholar. I am proud to be a black attorney here in Hawaii, advocating for the needs of those that are most vulnerable and those that need us to show up if there's a wrong that needs to be righted. If there's a wrong that needs to be righted. And I believe that we carry on the legacy of Dr. Johnson because we don't shy away from the things that are hard. So I also want to encourage you that just because something's hard does not mean it's impossible. It just means it needs you to show up and show it what's possible, right? And so to the African American Lawyers Association of Hawaii, to our leaders that I see here, I see so many of our members here today that continue to tell the stories. And Troy, as you said, we have keepers of stories. Keep sharing your stories. Continue to share your stories. You don't know how sharing your story may impact someone else, may provide liberation and a space for empowerment for someone else. Our attorneys have made sure that Dr. Martin Luther King is the holiday honoring his birth is a holiday here that's recognized in Hawaii, which you would think that with someone as great as Dr. King, that would come easy in a place such as Hawaii. But it takes effort. It takes someone taking a stand, and it takes someone being able to speak up and speak out. As an Ulu Lehua scholar, I mean, we had opportunities to serve as teaching assistants at the law school, to be able to take what we learn and then help those that are coming up after us. What an incredible opportunity to be able to take what you've learned and share it with your students in a way that maybe their professor couldn't. And it's like, boom, over your head, but you're able to talk in a way that your classmates can understand. My classmates have gone on to be serve in so many different ways, the prosecutor's office, in working with a medical legal partnership. Where else are they? Legal aid. We just have everywhere. And as you said, we have a federal judge that's going to be coming out of this program. And so, sometimes you may feel like you're not good enough, or you're this, or you're that, or this experience for life or whatnot. But to have a program that uniquely looks at and says, your experience, we can use someone like you here. We can use someone that has knowledge, that may be a mother, a father, parent that had to put their education off and then come back, and use this. And now you know what it's like to maybe advocate for the rights of people because you had to be someone who maybe needed to use food stamps or to do something. And now to walk with people through that as their attorney, formerly a social worker, I'm a social worker and attorney, to walk them through that is incredible. And we've even had our current dean of the law school, Dean Camille Nelson, who prior to being a dean of our law school taught us, would come and do to teach us. And so we've learned from brilliant minds. And thank you, Dean Nelson, for taking on the helm to serve and lead this great law school and to come and share your brilliance with Ulu Lehua scholars. So I just want to honor you for what you've done for us. We learned towards together. And so we're able to, as Ulu Lehua scholars, learn from people that are literally brilliant, brilliant. We are able to have people lead us and provide mentorship. And so I want to encourage you, if I may, to give back, in whatever capacity that you may, to continue this legacy so that we can see what's possible. And I'm so thankful that Dr. Johnson had this dream so that we can continue in this. And, just in closing, I just want to say I'm so thankful that each of you came here this evening to learn a little bit more about the African American Lawyers Association. And I want to say that our membership is open to all attorneys. And in your book, you also wrote about the non-African American lawyers who have also played such an influential role in the work that we are doing here.
Judy Waitman was a member.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, because we have to walk together to hear each other's stories, to share, to learn what's possible. And I also want to mahalo my mother. She is a stroke survivor, and she made her way all the way from Maui over here by herself. I'm usually traveling with her, but she knew about the importance of this evening and wanted to be here. I get a lot of my advocacy. I'm also the founder and managing attorney for my law firm, Speak Out and Up Law, which is rooted in Proverbs 31:8 and 9, that says, "Speak up for those that are being crushed, just seek justice for the poor and the helpless." And my mother, because people opened doorways and pathways for her, has made sure that the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, honors the rights of persons with disabilities. And when we were in DC, she spoke and she introduced herself as we were at the National Low Income Housing Coalition's disaster recovery convening. And she says, "I'm not afraid of anybody. I'll speak up and take anything on if there's a right that needs to be wronged." And so I want to thank you, Mom, for having that passion, because I don't think I would be where I am today without you. So I just want to honor you for fighting and instilling that in me to be able to be the advocate that I am, for raising me here in Hawaii. And so I just really want to thank you so much. And so I want to just, in closing, just say to our Lehua scholars, again, I want to address you because you're our future. You bring such a wealth to this program. As I said before, you were selected for a reason. Don't ever let anybody diminish you. In law school, there was those that tried to diminish, my greatness, and I'm a little outspoken and whatnot. But now I get paid to be outspoken, so I'm like, oh, this is so great. This is so great. And so, yes, yes, it paid to be. I can't believe it. It's like a dream come true. So, I just want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to share your stories. You may have written your personal statements and you thought only a small people were gonna, but it was your stories that got you into law school. It was who you are. And so in a profession that it was designed to keep people out, in a profession that the law has been used to diminish you and to say where you can and you cannot go. Push through those doors. Link arms with people here this evening. Link arms with people who are different from you so you can learn from each other. And so I'm just very, very thankful to be an Ulu Lehua scholar. I'm proud of that. And I'm proud to lead this organization, the African American Lawyers Association. And I can't wait for our next judge to come out of the African American Lawyers Association. I need a nap. But I really just appreciate you. So thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, for having this stream for this program.
So I told you it was going to be a good night, right? Great speakers. So I'm going to ask one question for the speakers, but think about questions. We're going to open it up for some questions from the audience. So my question to the panel, clearly Dr. Johnson was a trailblazer and brilliant in so many ways. And Leslie, you touched upon this a little bit, but if everybody could, and Leslie, you can expand too on this, what ways do you think we can further his vision in 2024?
I have an answer, but I'm not Leslie.
Go ahead.
But I have an answer. I think everybody needs to realize this hate that's going on about affirmative action. They need to realize that it's important to be more diverse in, especially in the law, but not just the law, in medicine, and all kinds of professional fields, is to embrace diversity, which does make us a stronger country. But there's all this hate going on. Even the Supreme Court is disagreeing with affirmative action. And really, the pre-admission was an affirmative action program. And I'm proud to say I was an affirmative action program when I went to law school, University of Washington. And it included people who were not ordinarily included. And you get more diversity of thought. And also, a lot of the people that are into or admitted into the pre-admission go on to serve different communities than the mainstream admittees do. Historically, let's look at, Yale comes to mind, but historically, look to see Yale, is it George Bush and his sons and, the progeny, the privileged were admitted into the law schools. And so Dr. Johnson saw all of this, experienced all this. And so when he came to Hawaii, I think it was brilliant of him to ensure that the pre-admission program remained well-funded, had wonderful people coming to teach, that the students were supported financially and emotionally. So personally, I think that that's very important, moving on from 2024, all the way to 3024 and beyond. Sorry, but we love to argue, right?
Oh, that was for
Don't be
everybody.
sorry.
That was for everybody.
I get nothing from this, but I want to say, Dr. Johnson left a trust to the law school to be sure that programs such as these continued. My law school class gives a gift every year. Thank you, Chad, for reminding us every year. Just remind us a little earlier than the deadline, but that we want to give. But I would encourage you all to become donors to the Lehua Scholar Program. I would encourage you to, if you can't financially contribute, what else can you do? Can you come and share at the law school during our programs and whatnot, so they can see? I look in this audience and I see the diversity in the audience. We need to see that at the law school. We need to see that at the law school, because I saw diversity. I was the only Black student to graduate in my class in 2018. And so we need to be able to see the diversity, but I really want to encourage you all to give, because a lot of the times, sometimes the Lehua scholars are working. You're not supposed to work your first year, but a lot of people have to work because it's expensive living here. So I would encourage you, if you could give $5 a month or $5 a year, give back to this program. This program does incredible work for people that oftentimes may not have had the opportunity to come to an incredible law school such as the William S. Richardson School of Law. And Dr. Johnson saw to it. I mean, you were able to put a dollar amount to it because you were a trustee, but that is a lot of money that he was able to do as a Black man to give that amount of money. So because of the, I mean, I don't think it's free to do the program, right, Troy? It's not free.
Not yet.
Or even to run it, it's not free. So I just would encourage, if you can give of your resources, whether that's your time or your talent, to give back to this program. It's one of the most meaningful programs, I believe. I'm unbiased, so at the law school. But that's where I think that we can continue Dr. Johnson's legacy, is by giving of our time and our talent and our finances.
Well, I really agree with what Daphne and Leslie has said, and especially I think what would help and aid the program is to devote your time and your effort and participate with the students there. To be a tutor, to be a mentor, to speak to that class. And I think also this may not directly benefit the school, but to honor Dr. Johnson's legacy and what he would try to do with us. And that is to understand what he was trying to communicate, and that was to respect law. He was truly interested in jurisprudence, and he devoted his life not tearing down the system. And it could use a lot of improvement, as many would argue, especially today when you're hearing all these arguments about our Supreme Court. But we need to bear in mind that the court, its composition, is political in a certain way. They're not elected. They're an unelected committee of 9 individuals at the U.S. Supreme Court. They go through vetting by Congress. They're appointed by the president. But they're there, and they do, in some indirect way, reflect their political philosophy to a certain degree and their personal values. And people interpret that when they don't like the decisions in a negative way. And I don't think that is what Dr. Johnson saw in our system. What he saw was an institution, the best institution in the world in terms of our system of law and how we govern ourselves. And I think one way to honor the program and to support it and give it its strength is to remember that. And if you can communicate that to others, that would do a lot, especially if you're alumni from our law school and alumni of the program. But at the very basic level, to donate your time, if you can, and financial resources, if you have that ability, to the program itself.
Okay, any questions out there? If not, I have another question. Yeah.
Well, my question is in regards to like the current or the ongoing health migration issue in Hawaii, and just like what are ways in which you believe we can, I guess, like really avoid local talent sort of leaving the islands, and in perpetuation of like Dr. Johnson's legacy, and how we can support local youth and just keep local talent local, if that makes sense.
I can answer again. Sorry for being hogging the mic, but you know, I think that's a very good question, and in fact, that's why the University of Hawaii Law School was founded, is to keep people who can't afford to go to the mainland schools or don't want to go to the mainland schools here in Hawaii, and also to give the community of Hawaii lawyers who are from here, practice here, who are going to go back into the Hawaii community. So that was Dr. Johnson's thought and legacy, as well as William Richardson's thought and legacy. So there needs to be, at least at the university level, more of an effort to understand that if you want to keep people here, you have to do something about it and create opportunities for them to excel and to get certain degrees and to be able to stay here. So that's one thing that Dr. Johnson, the pre-admission program, is doing and continuing to do.
And just really quickly to the point about what the law school can do, I'm thankful that Dean Nelson helped to, or, you know, during her time as dean, to start the JD Flex program, where you can go to law school on any island, anywhere you are, because not for everybody, it's not feasible to leave Maui or Kauai or Big Island to come to law school. So now we have a program at the law school where you can remain in your community and learn in your community. And that is so important to me, because I know they both, Dean Nelson and Troy Andrade, have had to hear from me. It's not the University of Honolulu. It's the University of Hawaii. And so why does you have to only go to Honolulu to get your education? And so what a difference that makes to the practicing attorneys here. I want to encourage you to open up internships in your offices or at your organization, to have an intern in your office. My law firm has interns currently at my law firm, and it makes a difference. They get to learn. They're getting an opportunity to meet with clients, do consultations, go to court with us. It made a difference. I did prosecution clinic at the law school, and I was prepping my case, and I said, I was so ready. I was so ready. I forgot my name. I said, "Good morning, Your Honor. My name is," and I blanked. I blanked, and I've had this name my whole life. But you know, to give real life opportunity and skills, right? So, real life opportunities to students in their community so that they can start to learn, what do they like, what do they not like, connections can they make in Hawaii, so that they don't have to go to the continent to practice. They can practice right here where they've gone to law school.
You know, I'm going to preface my comments by telling you this, in my personal opinion. It's not a reflection of our law school's policy or their ideas or anyone. It's my personal beliefs about this question and this issue. We are losing our people. The locals are leaving Hawaii. There's no question about that. Hawaii is changing because of that. Our culture is changing. We're losing it. I remember growing up in Hawaii as a child. It was a totally different time and culture. Values were different. People were closer. People helped each other. They were communities. And you need to ask yourself, why? Why is this happening? It's the economy. People cannot afford to live here anymore. Unless you're earning 6 figures and more, you can't even buy a house. Imagine that. I heard once, not too long ago, that we're the most expensive state in terms of our cost of living in the country. I think we exceed now New York and California. And if you want to keep people here, we have to change that. And that means getting involved in electing individuals who are going to do something about it. Not just talk the talk as you always hear in all these political advertisements, all these elected officials. We call them politicians, and that has a derogatory characterization, right? Oh, that's a politician. It's come to that. Not recent, it's been around for a long time. But that's what we have to change. If you keep on putting the same people in office, re-elect them because of their race, how slick they look, their tremendous ads, or because they can do your cousin or a family member, a friend, a favor, we're going to have the same thing. And eventually, there will be no Hawaii as you know it. It's exactly what Dr. Johnson said to me. Lawyers are the social architects of society. They make the laws in many ways, and indirectly and directly as elected officials oftentimes, or administrators in the executive departments. You need to elect those people. You need to get involved. Elect those people who are going to really come through for you and for our people. I feel sorry for the generations now, the generations after me. I can just imagine if this course continues, the children are all going to suffer. They won't have the life you have in Hawaii, the life I have in Hawaii that I was blessed with. We need to do something, but it takes action. You can help that action occur by talking to your friends, to your relatives, getting involved behind people who are running for office that are not afraid to speak up, even if they're going to be a member in the legislative branch that might not be put on any committees because they're bucking the system. They're bucking the party politics. You know, today it's everything about being loyal to the party. You see it locally and nationally. And if you continue to enable that kind of elected officials to be in power, you're going to have this continue. And it will destroy Hawaii, our culture. That is probably the most unique culture in the country. And it's sad to see what's happening. And you can do something about it. And that's what I would encourage you to do.
Yeah, go for it.
I agree with everything everyone has said on the panel. I just want to tell you about a story. It's a true story that happened when I came here to look for a job in the legal community, and I think you should know about this. I think it still happens. I looked at all the law firms to see diversity and couldn't see very much. To be honest with you, it was predominantly white male. I have to tell you that. So I thought I'd apply at some of the law firms, and so I put up together a resume, sent it around, and I met with a couple of people, and one person, hiring person, said, "Oh, you know what? We don't hire people from the University of Hawaii Law School." Now, my resume says University of Washington, but it didn't matter. I looked local, and that's all they did is look at me and not the resume. Then I had another person, legal aid, and the person was a politician, so I'm not going to mention his name, although I don't know. But anyways, same thing. We don't hire people who went to University of Hawaii Law School. So there was a lot of prejudice in this state, in this town, against people who looked different from the mainstream, at that time, mainstream lawyers. And so it was difficult. I did get a job at the public defenders, but hey, that was fun. But, then there was also a time when I was practicing and there were one female judge, the whole state, just one, Marie Milks. And it was a sad state, it was sad. And it took a while, but now I think we have over 50% women. But it took a while. You just got to keep at it. Don't let anybody stop you. But I still think when I look at the top 10 richest people in Hawaii and the magazines, I look for diversity. Maybe one, maybe two women. I don't see anybody black. I don't see very many brown people either. And I wonder, where did they come from? They come from the mainland. So something's got to stop. You got to open up, be more diverse, understand that just because you graduate from University of Hawaii Law School doesn't mean you're beneath someone who graduated from Harvard or whatever. Because it's what a person can give and can do for the community that matters. And unfortunately, I still see, although it's much better, plantation mentality going on here. So it needs to change, and all of us can change it.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I very much appreciate your comments, and it was all very positive. I just want to comment that the open door of the law school greatly contrasts with the med school at UH. I had the unfortunate task to sue the med school for discrimination, about 20 years ago. And an African Hawaiian student who grew up on the Big Island, Chad Eglin, was my client. And he told me that the University of Hawaii Med School had never graduated an African-American male student. And I told him, well, that couldn't be true. But when I sued the med school 20 years ago, they ultimately said they had graduated a African-American male student, but they had admitted him as a fourth-year student, and so he hadn't actually matriculated through there. Now, I know the med school is a lot smaller. I just want to say that I do see a difference between how the law school is administered and how the med school is administered. When I went to University of Washington Law School, starting in '71, there was a lawsuit filed by a guy named Marco DeFinis, who said that the admissions program at the University of Washington was discriminatory because it didn't admit him. And he got admitted on an injunction, and ultimately his case was declared moot by the Supreme Court because he had graduated by the time the case hit the court. But his lawsuit changed the admissions committee of the University of Washington. As a result of the student protests in the 60s at the University of Washington, there were students on the admissions committee, and they made big changes in the composition of the law school class. So when I got in, there were maybe 20 African-American students in the first-year class and only maybe 3 in the third-year class. By the time Daphne came through, the University of Washington Med School, because of the DeFunis case, they had eliminated the students from the admissions committee, and they weren't admitting as many African-American students. That has to do with the politics. That has to do with the politics, and we see the politics going on in the Supreme Court all over the country today. The point I want to make is that studying all these law school cases, the DeFunis case, the Bakke case, there was the University of Michigan case before that. There are more people qualified to be lawyers who apply to law schools all over the country than get admitted. The people who get admitted, they're qualified generally, but they're admitted because politically they're amenable to the committee some kind of way. And that's just the reality. The big firms tend to represent the big money, and so you don't see very many minorities in those law firms unless, of course, they're representing the big money. But the small firms represent the regular people, and they can make a decent living representing ordinary people defending their rights. And I see the University of Hawaii Richardson Law School as a beacon promoting regular people's rights. Because, you know, those people who didn't get a job working in those big firms had to go out and start representing real people. So I appreciate all your comments and keep on doing the good work.
Thank you so much. If I could really just quickly add in there that part of the origin story of the pre-admission program and now the Lehua program is, of course, Dr. Johnson was there, but it was law students that were on the admissions committee in that first year class that said we needed this program. Those folks are John Waihe'e and Alan Ho. I don't know if you know Alan Ho,
Yes,
but
we know.
John Waihe'e and Alan Ho were the student members of the admissions committee in that first class that had, you know, the foresight to work with other folks to bring this to fruition. Sorry. Yeah, so we'll take one more question. Judge Sims. Oh, okay.
Aloha, I'm Shelly. I'm class of 23. And thank you. So my question is, in the history of the law school, has there ever been a task force that's dedicated to commemorating historical figures that came through the law school and out of the law school? Because I feel like I did visit quite a few schools on the mainland when I was doing research for one of my classes, and I would see these halls in some of this. I ended up going to like University of Texas, Austin. I went to Howard. I mean, and they would have these halls where all of the publications from all the professors were cased, or you would see, you know, the landmark cases that they worked on, students who went to found organizations, students who went to found you know, nonprofits doing advocacy. And you know, there's something about bringing the history to life into the forefront of younger people's minds that gives them, you know, a sense of, I'm a part of a greater narrative to be great amongst other greatness that has already passed through these halls, so to speak. And so I'm wondering if there was ever a task force dedicated to kind of putting that in place, so that when you do have students that walk the halls of the law school, they can see right away that this is the footsteps I'm stepping in. This is the greatness that I'm stepping in, and here is where they all went. Instead of like, you know, because a lot of times students don't come out to the talk stories. They don't come out to the extra programs because they're busy in school. But if there was something dedicated to that, and if it died, I wonder if we can bring it back to life. And if it never happened, what are your thoughts on something like that? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if there has been a task force on it. I'm not sure. I think it's a wonderful idea and something that, pending the dean's approval, I'd be glad to work on seeing how we can do that.
I think the closest that we have to that is sort of in the library. And Justin, Professor Levinson is nodding his head. So we have, it's a great idea. We do have some of that in the library, and there was a significant initiative as part of the 50th anniversary gala. Sorry, I don't mean to turn my back to anybody. That we had a wonderful display that was in an opening space. And so we have a fabulous archivist who kindly put together a lot of that at our behest. And so it's presently living in the library. I think ultimately it would be nice if it was also digital for those who can't physically be with us. Either they're flex students online or they can't ambulate and be with us, right? So it's important to think about the modality. But as you know, for us, part of it is, where is the space that is long enough and weather protected enough to not degrade some of the photos, etc. So that has been something we've been figure out where we would have that. Can't be in the courtyard for obvious reasons, right? Can't be in the faculty hallway because we don't have the wall space. The clinical building, where do we put, right? So we have been thinking about these things, but I would encourage you, there's some display for all of you. Some of this is actually on our law library website, and it's really well done. And Ellen Cachola, the archivist, is fabulous. So great idea, and we are working that, and also to make sure it's accessible in multiple modalities.
Leslie.
No, I don't. I want Judge Sims to
No, I
ask
think
her question. But Shelley, I was glad that Dean Nelson answered that because I thought you just volunteered yourself for a committee.
really
You
just
always
comments
have
on what we,
something to add. I would love to hear from you.
okay, this is what Leslie does.
I know.
Okay.
We've
One of the
established
things
I'm outspoken.
there was a comment made about the status and what people thought of graduates of the William S. Richardson School of Law. And, as we talked about, I was, on the bench for a number of years. And in that capacity, I did have law clerks. And oftentimes we'd also have student interns during the time when I was at circuit court. And we often had, students coming in and I had the chance to talk with them. I had the benefit of being a law clerk myself. Oh, wow. That was a long time ago. Yesterday. Oh, my God. It was like, oh, my goodness. But anyway, in that experience, I had the honor of working as appeals first started. And it was with Judge Hayashi and Judge Burns and Judge Paget. And it was just an absolutely incredible experience. And so when I was on the bench, as soon as we come through, and we talk about, the experience of practicing in Hawaii, I tended to encourage students who were considering law school, who hadn't quite gotten there, to look at the University of Hawaii, the Richardson School of Law, because at that time, as we know now, Leslie and all of you have alluded to the number of people who have come out of that law school and had such an impact on the state itself, the community itself. That's if that's what you're wanting to do to have an impact, then you need to be at that law school. You need to make those connections. You need to know those folks, and you need to know where those ends are. So I think that does help. I know, Daphne, that was the experience, early on. I think I've heard some of those comments as well. But I think that's changed significantly in the last, oh, Lord, I'm old. Anyway, I don't even want to say out loud how long ago that was. But anyway, that's been an important change that's happened to the prestige of the law school within the community, and the people who've come from the law school and what they've been able to contribute to this community is also a way in which to, maybe Doug is also encouraging, our young people coming up to know that they can have that significant impact on this community in a way that may not occur, going somewhere else. It is going to be a sacrifice, certainly. I think we're all sacrificing to a certain extent in being here, but it's also a lifestyle choice, something that you choose to do. So think about that. But it's a good school. I mean, I didn't go to Richardson School of Law, but I encourage everybody else to go there if they can. So that's all.
Thank you, Judge Sims.
I just want to say I've been here for 31 years, and I used to do the education program, and Judge Sims was stellar. Her volunteering was. Sometimes I'd almost have to say, we got to give another judge a turn with the students. So we the people, speaking engagements, she was fantastic.
And maybe I'll close off with this, that's a perfect way to also further this legacy, right? Is that thinking about all of this is not just law students and the law school, but this is about the kids, right? Going back into schools, elementary schools, talking to students about the rule of law, about branches of government, civics, civic engagement, civil engagement, right? That's where it all starts. That's how we're going to be able to generate the energy to keep students here in Hawaii, to keep them interested in law, in governance, in all of this. And so I'll wrap up with that, but if you could please join me in thanking our amazing panelists. Thank you all so much. Here's a couple more pictures of Dr. Johnson. So we are having a couple more events. So in September 11th, we're going to have another event to honor Chrissy Jima, who is also a director of a program of the Lehua program and supporter of all things. And then in November, if you're interested, we're having our big 50th anniversary celebration, which is going to be at Ko'olau Ballrooms. Tickets are like going fast. So please join us if you can in November. But thank you again so much for coming. Thank you again to the panelists. Amazing, amazing time tonight. Take care. Drive home safely. Aloha.